Hello and welcome to LightBody Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Lara May, and today we have with us Courtney, a traditional trained Ayahuasquera with over 20 years of professional plant medicine and shamanic experience. She is the co-founder of Plant Medicine People, and do you pronounce that Basay Ibogaine?
Basay, yeah, you got it.
Basay Ibogaine Clinic, and is wholly devoted to helping people heal and change their lives within the power of plants. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's so lovely to talk to you.
Yeah. So tell us about your journey and how you came to be the Ayahuasquera, especially with 20 years of experience. That's I think pretty significant in this day and age, because that shows me that you were investigating and participating with these experiences before they were sort of the norm. I don't know, maybe they're still not the norm, but they're definitely becoming more into just even the realm of like daily conversation for certain groups of people, I think, for sure.
Yeah, I am kind of an accidental pioneer in the space. Like, I didn't do that on purpose because really, I just followed the guy I was dating to the jungle 22 years ago. And he was like, do you want to go do this ayahuasca thing? Which there was nothing on the internet about it.
Right.
Like,
yeah. No.
I thought that sounds like an adventure. And when I got there, I had this awareness of, oh no, this isn't just psychedelic journeys. This is work. I could feel at the time I was a functional alcoholic. I was very severely bulimic. I'd been diagnosed bipolar. I was dealing with all kinds of things like beneath the surface that my life didn't reflect because I had a good life on paper. I was just really miserable and ashamed to admit that, actually. And I remember as soon as I got to this retreat, my self-hatred, all of this stuff came up to the surface. I'm like, uh-oh, this is not fun times on drugs. No way. And, from the first cup of ayahuasca, I got something I didn't have before, which is hope. Like hope that I could feel better. That, it's not a quick fix. There's no such thing, but it gave me a path of healing that I engaged in for a couple of years, going back and forth. And as I started feeling better and better in my body, I kind of got this courage of like, kind of white girl from Montana learn to work with ayahuasca in the traditional way. And so that answer was yes from my teachers. And so began my training, not just, my work on a personal level, but learning to help others with the medicine.
For sure. That's beautiful. And I feel like nothing's by accident. So yeah, like maybe it wasn't, necessarily deliberate, like we are going to the jungle to do this, it was like, oh, well, we're here. So yeah, let's try this out. But yeah, no, it's definitely, I mean, I haven't participated myself. I've definitely been hearing the call of Mother Ayahuasca, as they say. But I still haven't taken that leap yet. So I have a lot of questions that I think will also help the audience sort of maybe learn more and start to maybe if they're also feeling the call to sort of discern for themselves, like what's right, when, where, all those questions. So let's just start with, how do plant medicines assist in our nervous system regulation? So if you've listened to my shows, then, I like to weave science in with the spiritual too. So let's start with sort of the biology of it. What's happening in our body?
I love the emergence of those two. So, in a very sort of kind of overarching way, what's happening is plant medicines help us to do what we're supposed to do as human beings, which is to move through the imprints of trauma. Like part of our conditioning these days is to contract. If something difficult, painful happens, right, we do this thing where we like contract and then we hold it. We don't do it on purpose. It's just, we're not taught that it's safe to feel our emotions. And, I always use the analogy of like, if a deer gets chased by a predator and then it gets back to a place of safety, that deer will shake.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just process all of that. And then start grazing like nothing happened, because it's released it from the nervous system.
Right.
So Like ayahuasca in particular, I remember when I first started drinking her, I would just shake all night long, like my jaw trembling, my body just shaking. And I realized that was a trauma release. Like, and it's not just revisiting the memories of the traumas. Usually we've done that so many times that it's not about rumination or processing on a mental level. It's first and foremost letting the body let go of what it's been carrying, that it's finally safe to do so. And this medicine, well, there's lots of medicines that do this, just help to facilitate the natural process. Then we can integrate what occurred, so that release alone, it's like a purge, and it is such a gift. It's so powerful.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I love that. That's so true. And thank you for also sharing your personal experiences. I think that also helps people relate and sort of like start to maybe get an idea of what to expect, although I'm sure it's different for everyone. And I love that too, that from my own research, that, Mother Ayahuasca meets you where you are. And, from what I understand, and will only bring you, even though it might feel overwhelming at the time, only really brings you like what you're ready and able to process and deal with too. Would you say that's true?
It's so true. And it's so often though, I'll be in my head going, I can't do this. I can't face those memories. I can't face this part of myself. And there's a consciousness to this medicine. And she's always like, but you're doing it. Like,
yeah.
I can't take anymore. And so there's times where I'm pushed to my edge, but never really mentally. My body's great. Usually like, oh, thank God I'm releasing this. It pushes on those mental stories that we have around our limitations. But yeah, she's a good mom. She really is.
And so what do you see, or what have you seen in maybe different instances, like when the body is moving from dysregulation into a coherent state with these plant medicines? How does that show up, or what does that look like, or what has your experience been, or maybe all of those things?
Yeah, well, the interesting part with that, Lara, is that oftentimes we think something's wrong, because if we've lived a life of dysregulation and just being in a fight or flight response most of the time, and we reach a place of peacefulness, like it can feel like, wait, what's wrong? Something's weird. So a lot of times, because I do integration work with people with this too, what I have to help is to make the connection to the fact that this was actually our natural state. But most people who don't feel safe in their bodies, they probably haven't felt that way, maybe their whole lives if they had childhood trauma.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So true.
So it's this weird process of developing an identity or a relationship with the state of consciousness that we want, but it's so unfamiliar to just kind of feel you wake up and you're not ruminating, or you're not fixating or vigilant. And then what? Then what is to establish new rituals and just lifestyle patterns to do things with that energy that aren't about surviving, but it can be this weird whole identity shift. And so it's just kind of like confusing to be like, well, who am I now if I'm not constantly mitigating these trauma responses?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think so many people can relate to that, like they have, the constant dialogue running through their head, whether it's, if they're struggling with a mental illness or an addiction, or oftentimes both, and everything that carries with it, the memories, the shoulda, woulda, couldas, like you said, the ruminating, that can be so wrapped up in all of that stuff that we don't even give our consciousness space to exist, because all that is like monkey mind stuff. And that oftentimes is our automatic, thinking and trains of thought, because that's how our brain works. Unless we intentionally come in with our consciousness, our will, our determination, our deliberateness of choice and say, stop it. But again, even get to that point on your own, takes something, either a teacher or a tool, or, there's something there that also like wakes us up out of that cycle. And so would you say that this maybe is just more maybe of a more jarring wake up.
Yeah, it's the fast track. You know, things like IFS and EMDR, and like there's amazing modalities that now, because we understand so much more about trauma now than we did 20 years ago, right?
Well, and the human brain. I mean, like thinking about
Right.
Joe Dispenza's work too, like
Yeah. And really, we're still just scratching the surface of the miracle. Like the neurologist I work with in the Ibogaine space said the other day that we have more neurons in our brains than there are stars in the galaxy.
I love that. Oh, I just got chills.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, my brain's amazing.
Well,
Like,
because we're made up of the stuff of the stars too, and so I think that just reinforces like how infinite and amazing human bodies are, even on the physical level. Sorry, keep going.
how much we don't understand. You
Right.
know,
Yes. Yeah.
we're still learning, but then turning to nature as our avenue of A, learning, and B, healing. You know, so plant medicines, they are the fast track, and they're not for everybody, but it is an avenue, especially for people with severe PTSD, that the slower processes like EMDR, which is incredible, but can take a long time, can just kind of fast track that. Now, that said, that means you got to have a foundation that is stable enough to work with that intensity. And from a physical level, I always say, can you get on a really intense roller coaster? Okay, if you can handle that, then you can handle the intensity from a physical perspective of plant medicines in a general space. But we also have to make sure people have some tools from a psychological perspective too, because it can be traumatizing actually to be in that intense portal. So it's not for everybody, but it definitely is the fast track.
Okay, yeah. So that's one of the things I was actually going to ask you, but let's first, so when you say an intense role, we're talking about blood pressure, like heart health, that sort of thing, because the chemistry and biology behind this medicine can amplify those pathways in your body. And so it is important to have a physical, see your practitioner before you decide to do a ceremony. And from my research too, most places that facilitate ceremony, regardless of what country they're in, actually require some sort and or provide one themselves by their own physician before the ceremony takes place. And so,
yes,
yeah,
if they're not asking all of those questions about your medical and mental history,
that's the red flag. Yeah, red flag. Okay, I love this too. I love like that we're getting into the do's and don'ts. Okay, and so then my next question was going to be, can it be re-triggering and re-traumatizing? And so, okay, so it's good to sort of prepare yourself, work with. And that's the other thing too, from what I found, and I wanted to ask you your approach to this, is usually there's like a preamble of work and a preamble of diet, sort of a preparation period. Then you have the ceremony, and then you mentioned it, but I do definitely want to ask you more about it, the integration phase, which I'm sure is so important. I mean, integration is so important to so much work, and I think a lot of times that's the missing piece for people in terms of longevity of impact. And I think this is true. You could say, like, even in Western medicine, like we give people a pill, but we don't help them integrate what's going to help it, like the effects last. Like, let's say for like weight loss, for example, big example, classic. But let's like stay with plant medicine here. Like I try well not to diverge on my path.
But your integration across the board is missing in our culture. Yes.
Yeah, for so many things, spiritual, mental health, all the things. Okay, so let's just maybe talk about that from your perspective and how you do it. And maybe again, like if you want to weave in some like red flags, some do's and don'ts, so what to expect, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, integration is the most important piece, and it's the piece that's most neglected, because you do the preparation, which is usually first on a physical level, just to make sure that your body is not processing the burger it had last night, you know, that it's been clean for a week or two, and that there's nothing contraindicative with whatever medicine you're working with. Each of them are different. You know, ayahuasca has a different protocol list than ibogaine, than mushrooms, etc.
Yeah.
You're with somebody who has an expertise in that and can advise of what is safe and not safe. And then preparation from a mental perspective is that like the capacity to handle the intensity. Do you have tools in your toolkit? Maybe some somatic things of breath work and like all the interesting things that have come forth in trauma work to kind of help move to parasympathetic should things get really intense, because it's hard processing our trauma loops and facing our shames and things like that. So that's what preparation looks like. And then whatever happens in the mysterious, wild ceremony work. Then integration. I mean, first and foremost, this sounds really simple, but for me, integration is in part still being with the experience, because just because, you're done with your 6-hour ceremony, whatever it is, doesn't mean the process is over. And we have this way of just entering right back into our busy lives and like checking off the to-do list. It's like, wait a second, just be with that for a while. Ayahuasca gave me this expression of a balance of doing and being, which she calls the doobie dance.
I love that.
Most of us are just doing.
Yeah.
And we spend a lot of time being, and just how do I feel?
Yeah. And we are human beings, not human doings.
Yes. Amen. So being curious of what has shifted, what was stirred up, what do I need right now? Just asking ourselves those questions. And that's where I start with people when they're right in the aftermath, and being just really kind and gentle. It's not about meaning making. That's what everybody wants to do right away. What did it mean? Like, that comes later, and it doesn't even really need to come at all. It's more about like really paying attention to what has shifted and changed, and then what we need to do to embody that. I use the word embodiment as an interchangeable word with integration, because if it's not integrated into our bodies, into our daily walk, it's just mental fluff. Then I remember, I did this great ceremony and it told me all of the secrets of the universe, but then I didn't embody them. So what good did it do?
Right. Yeah.
So, and then embodiment is very personal. It depends on what came through the experience, but usually you get homework. Maybe you need to do some more meditation. Maybe you need to call mom and have like that heart-to-heart clearing talk. Maybe it's about the relationships, vocation, the space. There's all kinds of things that come through, but we have to make the changes step by step that came up, or we're going to repeat the same patterns. Like, so the medicines don't fix things for us. They illuminate, they expand our awareness. Then we got to do the work, which is what integration is about. It's about being with the experience, listening, and then making a roadmap of like, all right, so this is what I need to do to get more joy or healing or whatever it is that came through. And we got things, not just think about them.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. Wow. Okay. Beautiful. Do you find in the real world, how much consistency and follow through do you find with the people that you work with? I'm just curious. And this is not from a place of judgment. I'm just trying to get a pulse on.
For me too. So I'm going to say maybe 10 to 15%. And I'm just as guilty of like wanting to stay in the meaning making and not making the changes. And the expression I have for that is like, that's like doing the homework on the teacher's desk, is we just go to ceremony and we want that to be the space where the work is done. And that is like not where the homework needs to be. So it's hard for us as humans to, because the pharmaceutical world just programs us, take this pill, it will do it for you.
Yeah.
So it's a reprogramming that for most of us takes time, of like, oh, right, I'm responsible for making the changes. And that's why it's helpful to have a therapist or a coach or somebody that's really like understanding of the process. They can also hold you accountable, because the first promises that we break are the ones we make to ourselves.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and understanding that it's, like you said, like the ceremony is powerful and illuminating and enlightening, but really the healing journey is one step at a time, no matter where we are on it. The work is never done. And that's a good thing, because we're constantly learning about ourselves, evolving, learning new tools, trying things out, implementing, saying, oh, okay, I'll try this. Oh, maybe that's not for me. Whether it's, again, a meditation practice, breath work, yoga, different somatic practices too. Like you have to find what works for you. But when you do, then it clicks. And then I feel like then that's when it becomes consistency. And that's when it really becomes a true practice, something that you do every day. And, it doesn't matter how long you do it, but even just the attention to it every day can be so powerful and life shifting for sure.
I really feel that consistency, there needs to be some level of consistency around showing up for ourselves.
Yeah.
It look different at times. Like you said, maybe like a yoga practice wants to evolve into something more physical, out in nature, whatever it might be. But like, if we just put aside our own needs perpetually, which so many of us do, and prioritize everybody else on our list, we're not going to heal. We're not going to feel better. We're going to continue to disconnect from our bodies, from our space of wellness. And that's one of the things that plant medicines do, is they get us back into that accountability of, hey, you're in charge of you. Nobody else is going to do that for you. And that is an important shift for a lot of people, especially women, that we're just programmed to externalize. And we end up feeling terrible. As I just turned 50 last year. Thank God for plant medicines, or I wouldn't prioritize my own well-being.
Yeah. And I hope that we're moving out of that as a culture too. But I mean, there's multiple generations of us still on this planet that were raised and that way. So there is a lot of relearning and undoing to do when it comes to that, for sure. So let's shift a little bit and talk about Ibogaine, because I don't know if people are as familiar with that. I even myself, I would say, like, I don't even know if I would consider myself to have a superficial knowledge. Like, I know what it is, I know how the context in which it's used, but that's pretty much it. So tell us about that.
Ibogaine is the ultimate place where the clinical knowledge and shamanic knowledge is coming together, because it's medicine that must be worked with in a clinical way, because it does have some cardiotoxic events in the wrong hands. So Ibogaine is basically an alkaloid that's extracted from a plant called Iboga. And Iboga has been worked with for thousands of years in psychospiritual ways too, but we accidentally discovered back in the 60s that when you isolate the Ibogaine alkaloid, it connects to the opioid receptors in the body and disrupts addiction and gives a reset within 45 minutes, as if somebody is back to a pre-addicted state. And it does this with trauma too, because it interacts with both dopamine and serotonin receptor sites and gives that full reset. And then it stays connected to those receptor sites for 1 to 3 months afterwards, depending on the speed of somebody's metabolism. So it's really the only plant medicine, at least that I know of, that has this huge window of neuroplasticity after taking the medicine, where people not only feel great, but feel motivated to make these changes that I mentioned. But Ibogaine is the game changer for two main things. One, addiction, both with opiates and alcohol, and two, with severe PTSD. Because the way it is able to get into those neurotransmitter systems in the brain and the nervous system and maintain that for weeks afterwards is just unprecedented. So you're hearing a lot of it from war vets, that nothing else helps them feel better. People that have gone through the worst of traumas that are like, I'm now alive because Ibogaine reset my nervous system.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. So it must feel like the ultimate, sigh of relief. Like, oh my God, I'm free of these chains, of this prison that, PTSD and addiction, I feel like, keeps us in. I think that's an appropriate analogy, because oftentimes it feels like something that we can't snap ourselves out of, that we're just stuck in this loop no matter what we do. And honestly, I think that's what drives a lot of people dealing with these issues to take their own lives and to just exit this planet. They're like, I just can't take it anymore, and I can't get out of it, and I can't see out of it. And so thank God for something like this. And that, again, that it's becoming at least more in the conversation. I've heard from Joe Rogan that there are some powerful politicians that are working with state governments to make sure that this tool is available for especially our veterans, but really anybody that's struggling with these things. And so I'm so grateful for that, and I hope that this can speed up the awareness, and because obviously, the more questions we ask, then the more answers that are demanded, and usually that helps accelerate.
Yeah, and to your point, there are unlikely politicians, hardcore Republicans, Rick Perry, that are lobbying for this. And there's states that have put millions of dollars into research, which my mentor at Basse, our Ibogaine clinic, has been working with Ibogaine for 40 years, Dr. Deborah Mash. She's pretty much the foremost authority. And she was given approval by the FDA back in the 90s to study it. And it was so powerful that they pulled the funding for Ibogaine and gave it to Suboxone instead, because you have to be on Suboxone your whole life as an opiate addict, and Ibogaine can disrupt the addiction. So we've known about this for decades, Lara.
Yeah.
So but it's the vets and the people that are like, how are you going to deny these people that stood for our democracy and are traumatized for it the opportunity for a reset? So thankfully, really to them, the movement to legalize Ibogaine is alive again. And I really hope it's, for now, we can have to go to Mexico and places where it's decriminalized or legal. But the US really needs to make this available to people.
Yeah. I mean, it just seems really only like the medically responsible thing to do. I mean, I know like sometimes the US can struggle with what's actually medically responsible, but we won't go down that path today either.
We can always recover. And I think it was, in 2019, it became the #1 cause of death for people under 50 to die of an opiate overdose.
Yeah.
Like #1 cause of death. And I'm not saying Ibogaine's going to fix that for everybody, but it's a ray of hope that a lot of people don't have. And that's our #1 pandemic. That's what we have to address. And so that's why I feel like this needs to be more accessible to people, because it's a ray of hope for others that don't have hope.
Yeah. I've heard just through listening to, people that have had experience with it, like Joe Rogan talks, I think, fairly frequently about his friends and colleagues that have had these experiences, that they don't have to go back for like a second treatment. And so I love that you talk about that window where it's like 1 to 3 months. Have you seen instances where clients or patients or participants need maybe like a second journey or experience to maybe like help them through the next phase, or what have you seen in terms of that?
It will happen. Like, so first of all, it is kind of a miracle that a lot of people, it's one and done. Like they have reset, but it comes back to integration. Let's say you're dealing with an opiate addiction and your partner is too, and you come and you have the treatment and then you go home and you're around the addiction all the time. You're around the substance. It's going to be really hard to maintain your sobriety.
Sure.
Right? But if you make the changes in that window of integration that allows for support of the sobriety, of choosing things differently. So a typical rehab has maybe a 4% success rate. In the Ibogaine clinics that have been tracking this, they have a 70% success rate, defining success as no relapse in the first year.
Okay.
And so it's incredibly effective. But yeah, sometimes people either aren't able to integrate in that way, or maybe they didn't get quite to the root of the trauma. Like there are people that come back a few months later, a year later, but it's not like most medicines where, like with ayahuasca in that world, people come all the time, but it's like spring cleaning, Ibogaine, it's usually once or twice in your lifetime, and that's it. It is not a maintenance medicine, in other words. It is a reset.
How would you compare like the actual experiences when you're in it between the two, just for context? Because we've talked about the consciousness of Mother Ayahuasca. Does Ibogaine also have something similar? And
absolutely, absolutely. Which really schooled me when I took it, because I had a bit of a righteousness around shamanic, like, oh well, it's somewhat manipulated, even though it is from a plant, it's extracted and concentrated. Oh no, the spirit of Ibogaine was still very present. So totally a spiritual experience, even though it's more clinical in that way. So I got schooled on that in a good way. But Ibogaine is less personal than ayahuasca. It's more like ketamine. It's classified as a dissociative. And that's one of the reasons why it's so great for trauma, is it gives you this sort of 30,000 foot view. If you're remembering instances of war, of childhood trauma, it feels less personal. You're very quickly speeding through and sort of compartmentalizing it in the way that deer we talked about earlier would. It's not really replaying it, it's cleaning it up. Like Ibogaine feels like it just comes in and cleans out the clutter and reorganizes the neural pathways so that you remember things, but it's no longer got that imprint of pain. It's like, oh yeah, that thing that happened to me as a kid. And so it's really intense and very somatic, but it's not deeply emotional. So it's actually easier in some ways than ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is like, you're going to probably cry your eyes out and like really process the emotions. They work in very different ways. But I think Ibogaine is the most effective thing I know of for trauma because of that depersonalization in part. Like you're watching it, but it's more like a movie than it is reliving it.
Yeah, I mean, so you're able to see it from the outside, and that's super powerful. I mean, and you've alluded to a few tools that we have in the mental health space, like EMDR is a great tool, and IFS for sure. That if we're able to, we see outside of it, and even those. I mean, always work with a licensed or qualified practitioner for those too. So you're not re-traumatizing yourself. You're just, again, processing and moving through and moving on, really. So yeah, well, cool. That's amazing. I love that. So we talked about integration. What does that actually look like? Like how long? What does it involve? Is it different for everyone?
It always involves, in my opinion, that personal space of checking in with oneself on a daily basis and some level of self-care. It definitely involves trying to process and capture, journaling or voice recording the experience. And then what I always love to do is trace back what occurred based upon what the intentions were, because there's consciousness and intelligence to these medicines. And they take what we bring of like, I'm working with childhood trauma or whatever it is. And it's mysterious, the experience itself, how it relates. Sometimes it's like, I'm having visions of a dancing bear. What does that have to do with self-love? But it's less about the vision itself. It's more about the emotional response to it. And so what we do is we play detective. We unpack what occurred, tie it to the intentions, and see how the person is feeling and showing up differently now. And then the things that have shifted and changed that we want to ground in, that we want to embody, that's where we create the homework. So if you're in a less traumatized, more regulated state, what can we do to continue to nurture the nervous system to maintain that? Because we can go back to old patterns and behaviors, of course. But that's the basics of how I look at integration. It's personal, but there are these universal things that we got to pay attention to.
Yeah. Cool. Do you see some like classic consistent mistakes or maybe like missteps that people take afterwards?
Yeah, the hardest thing with Ibogaine is people feel so good they don't think they need to integrate. They think they're it, and there is a descent. There always is, gravity. It's functional gravity. And they feel so good. They're like, oh no, I don't need to prioritize integration. I'm great now. It's like, well, yes, that's wonderful. But in order to create that new state as a permanent residence, or at least a place we can come back to, that takes work. We all know that in the psychology space, that takes work. And that's the hardest thing is people, when they feel great, they think, oh, I'm done. I'm fixed, and life will still happen. So we do have to create a new home in this regulation, in this like reset that we experience. And so the hardest thing is convincing people to prioritize that when they feel amazing.
Yeah, creating that new set point of which, because it is, I mean, we have this term muscle memory, but like in the brain, there is also that, that default. And so we want to make sure that the new default is maybe not reactive or, like doesn't automatically go back into a certain train of thought or maybe a self-blame and self-destructive pattern or, whatever it is. We have to, I think, teach ourselves how we want to be and show up in the world, and instead of how we were unconsciously. So now I think it's an invitation to decide. I love this because I believe that we all create everything in our lives, even if it's bad stuff. We essentially did create it in some way, shape, or form. That's just radical responsibility. It's not judgment or blame or anything. It just is what it is. But it gives us an opportunity to decide, what do we want? What do we not want? What if I now am saying that, yes, I created this thing that happened in my life, even if it was horrible and traumatic and awful. How am I going to move forward so that I can create something different for myself that I definitely know that I want for sure? And so I think that's a beautiful invitation and opportunity. Like, you've taken this huge step to participate in this medicine. And it is a big step. It's a, like, I mean, I think for some people like you, especially like 20 years ago, there were some happy accidents and some opportunities that the universe presented us with the opportunity to say yes. And some of us did, and that's great. But these days, it's a little bit different. It's more of like an intentional yes and an intentional planning and preparation and all of those things that we talked about. And so within that, then I think we also have to plan, what do I want it to look like on the other end, on the other side?
That's so well said. Exactly. Because if we're not proactive and interactive with that process, then, I mean, let's face it, the world we live in is just full of opportunities to go back to a space of negativity and feeling traumatized. We have to work hard to make regulation and our optimism and our connection. And so like that will become the new norm again, even with a powerful experience that resets us. Like, we got to work to maintain that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the world in general just sort of keeps us down in the muck. And so we have to be intentional to even see out of that and then be wanting and willing to get out of it. So, let's see. What does being regulated and connected, can you describe to the audience what that, I mean, this is a very personal question and it's not the same answer for everybody, but just to give someone maybe the opportunity to even think about that if they're in a state of complete dysregulation and despair right now, like, what can they seek or hope to find within that regulated state? And we talked about a little bit too, that piece, but I want to hear more from you about that.
Oh, great question. Because the first thing that comes in is a relationship with trust. That in my regulated state, I trust that I will handle curveballs. Not that they won't happen, that I'll handle them.
Right.
And I trust the flow of my life. I trust that I'm supported, not just in terms of other human beings, but on a spiritual level. I trust death. Like, it's that it gave me back this sense of trust that life is actually conspiring in my favor. That this is all a really beautiful opportunity. Not, at some point I felt like this was just a space of torture. Like, it was just so hard to exist. And now it's not that things are easy. I still have all kinds of things happen, but I really trust that it's for me and I can dig in and treat it as an adventure and a lesson rather than just contract in the suffering. So it's just a spaciousness. And like, my teacher would always say, are you enjoying the ride? Because that's what it's about. Not controlling the ride, but trying to enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's so true. I think that's a big shift out of, where a lot of us, it's pretty easy, I think, to be in victim mentality, especially when we've been through something that we feel like that we didn't choose. Why would we ever choose some of these things for ourselves? Like, that seems like insanity. But and then, why did this happen to me, instead of thinking about, well, it happened for me. Like, it's given me these more opportunities and various things. So that's a big shift too. And that takes a lot of, growth, spiritual maturity. I don't know, a lot. What would you say about that? Like, shifting, does the medicine help with that? Or do we need to have already shifted out of that before the medicine?
That's a great question, because I still very much had a deep relationship with victim consciousness when I first found ayahuasca, and she helped me to reframe that. I had some knowledge that wasn't true, but I didn't really believe it. So I think that it's ideal that we have started to crack the code around how powerful we are in being co-creators, but required, like, the medicines can help wake up to that if needed.
Yeah. I mean, for a large part of my life, I, was aware of this whole concept of like sacred and soul contracts. And I would kind of be like, here, like, yes. And then, no, I'm not sure, especially when it came to like very, negative or traumatizing experiences, whether it was like for myself or others. I'm like, oh, I don't know, like, why would we choose such horrible things for ourselves to experience. Like, let's say that we do have a soul and our soul chooses certain things for us before we incarnate. But I do have to say, since I've started doing the QHHT work, which is quantum healing hypnosis taught by Dolores Cannon, and now I've also gone through the Beyond Quantum Healing training and approaches. And the more sessions I've done with clients around this hypnosis and really hearing from people's higher selves and subconscious about past lives, and really, like, it's a thing that our souls truly do choose these things for us to experience for a reason. And again, that might be a really hard pill for a lot of people to swallow, and I get that. But if we can just even give that like a moment of acknowledgement and thought, and then like let that lead the questions. Okay, well, if that's true, then why on God's green earth would I be put through, A, B, or C that would bring me to my knees and make me want to escape this planet,
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love QHD. By the way, my best friend is trained in that modality, and it's really congruent with the work I do with plant medicines of like connecting to that higher self.
Yeah.
When I do that, I mean, my higher self's a badass. She's like, yeah, I chose all of these hard things. And the way I frame that for people that can't quite get there is usually there's something that's happened in our past that we're far enough away from that we can look at with gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
That we have integrated, that we're like, well, yeah, I can see why that needed to happen because I learned XYZ, or it made me a better person, like whatever it is. Yeah. It's hard to do that with the things that we're still in pain around. But if we can look at something that we have moved from and healed from and go, yeah, that had to happen,
Mm-hmm.
then it clicks of like, oh, right, there's a method to the madness.
What about self-forgiveness? Does the medicine help us get there?
Goodness, yeah, because I still need a lot of help with that sometimes. Yeah, self-forgiveness, like ayahuasca in particular, we talk about her as the mom, right? Like, I feel such unconditional love from that plant spirit, and she loves my shadow because it exists, not in spite of it. Like, she always challenges me to be like, oh my God, you're so cute when you lie. Look at you. You're no, I'm not, just these parts that are so hard to love.
Yeah.
And give. Like, when you work with an intelligence that just does that effortlessly, it's really beautiful. That's why we call her a good mom. She loves us, like, and inspires us to be better, but not because we're judging or persecuting these parts. Like, we know IFS is so beautiful with that. It's about loving and integrating these parts, not about judging them. They're all there to try to help us survive. They're not trying to hurt us.
Yeah. And remembering too that, nothing exists on this planet without the polarity, without the shadow. In order to have the light, we have to have the dark. That just is the laws of the universe of Earth, of the planet of Earth. They might not be the laws out off planet, but they are definitely the laws of this dimension, of this time, of this space, of this planet. And I think also once we come to that realization, then we can then bring the compassion, the forgiveness, release a lot of the judgment that we oftentimes by default just place onto things, other people, and ourselves. And I think that's super powerful even within our spiritual journey. And it's funny, I like to talk to AI about a bunch of various things and just see what, what it comes up with. But it challenged, I love having spiritual conversations with like Chat GPT, for example, because it will it reminded me yesterday when I was having this conversation with it, like, no, like, this is part of the human experience. The definition of spiritual bypassing is trying to bypass the shadow. And so I think it's really, I think these medicines, that's probably one of the most powerful things about them is that the journey is not all hunky-dory. It's not all rainbows and light and love. Like, yes, you will get to the love, but in order to get to that love, you're going to have to face your shadow. But that's something that we should be doing anyway. We haven't. And I think, would you agree that that's really sort of the core purpose, or like the sort of the coming home and that big aha?
I would 100% agree. Like, there is no coming to the full potential of who we are as beings by trying to avoid our shadows. That all kinds of wise sages and philosophers and psychologists and like Carl Jung, etc., have given beautiful language to this for a long time. And yet we as humans are still trying to negotiate that. Well, is there a way around it though, or maybe above my shadow? And there isn't. So, and like you said, that's just the nature of duality. Maybe there's a triality or a quadrality or something out there somewhere, but we're not in it. We're in polarity, and it just is how there's no bypassing it. Trust me, I've tried a million times on ayahuasca. It's like, there's got to be a way around this, and nope.
Yeah, usually for me, I'm like, well, I'll just call in my angels and everything will be fine.
No, the angels will do into it all the more. Like,
yeah. Excuse me. So for people that are maybe resonating with our conversation, and maybe they were already feeling curious, or now they're super curious, what direction would you send them in? Like, what things would you have them keep an eye out for? What questions? What kinds of things would you say, okay, like this is how you'll know if it's a yes for you, or if you should keep on looking for something else?
The calling is so important that you're alluding to, that we feel called to work with these medicines. So we talked about ayahuasca and ibogaine today, very different medicines. And if somebody were to say, which one should I take? I'm like, I don't know. Which one do you feel a calling to be in relationship with? You know, not to try to attack it just with our logical minds. The calling is what I always listen for when I interview people, if they wanted to participate in one of these experiences. Yes, we also need to make sure that all the safety precautions and everything is in order. But first, it's this calling. So I would say, if anybody's like, ooh, my skin lights up when I hear about ayahuasca, or when we started talking about ibogaine, like I felt this opening in my heart, investigate that. Like, that's the calling, especially if you can't stop thinking about it, or somebody randomly brings it up to you in conversation, you know, like the universe is winking at us. Like, that's when I would say, okay, now it's time to go deeper and just talk to somebody who has the expertise. Like, that's always the first step, to talk it through, to make sure you're a good candidate, to get all your questions answered. Like, because there's a lot to understand about what you're signing up for, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then, so if people wanted to contact you, investigate you as their guide, how would they do that?
Oh, thank you for asking. So the two companies are plantmedicinepeople.com, and that's who I am on social media. That's the ayahuasca side. And Basse Ibogaine on the Ibogaine side. It's spelled Basse. By the way, that word means truth in the tradition that works with Iboga. That's why we called it that. So yeah, so Basse Ibogaine or Plant Medicine People. Yeah.
Cool. Beautiful. Is there anything else that you want to send people to, or references, or any other tools? Well, what would you like to leave people with today?
Oh, just that, like, reminder that we do not heal and come back to our natural state without that daily showing up for ourselves, of checking in. My question every day is, how you feeling, kiddo? How you feeling? What do you need today? And it's so powerful just to make sure there's that space of inquiry. And that's what the plant medicines do anyway. So might as well, like, either begin or emphasize that in our daily walk. Like, that it's just so transformative to pay attention.
Yeah. And, you know, I think I'm going to tack on to that with, if that answer for you is, I'm not okay, then that's okay too. It's important that we give ourselves space and permission to not be okay. I think there's a huge piece, again, culturally, and I don't know if we're growing past it yet, but to, again, just say, like, as many privileges as I might have on this planet of being an American, or, you know, like, whatever, like, it's okay for me to admit that I'm not okay. And then find resources for yourself, find someone to talk to, find, you know, whatever it is, a support system. But yeah, be honest. I guess the whole point of me saying this is, like, be honest. Be honest, because we can't really grow and move forward and start to heal until we reach that radical honesty, that, you know, and it's not, again, it's not meaning to be harsh. It just be truthful.
Can't do anything about something we're not naming, can we? Like,
Right. Yeah, that's how the human brain works. We have to name it.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, your expertise. Thank you for all the work you do in the world. I really appreciate it. Everybody, definitely check out plantmedicinepeople.com or baseibogaine.com if this is calling to you. Even if you just have more questions, I'm sure that, yeah, she's shaking her head yes for all of you that are not watching the video.
Maybe nodding. Okay.
Yeah.
And even if it's not reaching out to me, whoever you reach out with, they better be willing to have like really in-depth conversations to make sure it's right for you. That's like the first step. Don't trust anybody that isn't available for that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, thank you so much. We will let you go. We'll let you get back to your beautiful day. We appreciate you and all your work. And same to you, listeners. If you're driving or walking, don't worry. The show notes live at drlaramay.com/podcasts, and the links to Kat will be there. And yeah, and of course, if you have any follow-up questions, you're happy to also message me, and I can, you know, ferry that on to the appropriate person that it needs to meet as well. So thank you, everybody. We'll catch you on the next episode.